Well, so you've heard from the goofy guy, you've heard from the brilliant guy, and now you're going to hear from somebody who falls a little bit in between. Michael Green.
There are those who would say it's much closer to goofy than brilliant. So, last year, about 10 months ago, we did something just like this. Some of you were here. And at that time, I brought my daughter Juliet's sippy cups here. And I did it to tell a story. So I brought a plastic sippy cup, which is her favorite. This one, you'll notice, has princesses on it. That's one of the criteria, one of her top criteria. And then I brought my favorite, which is stainless steel. And I brought them to tell a story. And the story is to explain what we at CEH refer to as the toxic shell game. Now, the problem that we have is that we don't know what chemicals are in this one, and that's what I'm going to explain briefly about the shell game concept. So, plastic sippy cups historically have had a chemical in them that's a toxic chemical called BPA, bisphenol A. And so, in the intervening time, BPA has been banned in sippy cups and baby bottles. And so that's a great result, and it's the results of a lot of people, including the Center for Environmental Health, working on it. But I'm not sure what that means. And the reason I'm not sure what that means is because we don't know what chemicals companies will replace the BPA with. So BPA, Paul was describing hormone-mimicking chemicals, estrogen-mimicking chemicals. And BPA is an estrogen-mimicking chemical. So it confuses the body, just as Paul was describing. That's why it was banned for these products designed for small children to drink out of. But since we don't know what it will be replaced with, we don't know for sure what that means. Because it could be replaced with a chemical cousin that has a similar name or a similar molecular structure that might even have a worse health impact. What we'll know is that it's not as well studied as BPA that's been taken out. So how come we don't know what chemicals are in the different products? The reason we don't know is because the companies that make the products aren't required to tell us what's in the products that they make. Not even if it's a product designed to have a 3-year-old girl drink out of it. So now the BPA is banned, and companies that make sippy cups are going to have to figure out, if they had BPA in it before, what are they going to use instead? And since we don't know, that's why my favorite one is the one that's stainless steel, because we don't have to worry what they're replacing it with, because the metal doesn't require anything like that. It may be common sense that chemicals should be tested before they're put into products, and then we would know the health impacts. And so we would know what the chemicals are that we're bringing into our homes or our workplace or our office and our bodies, but it doesn't really work that way. Companies rarely test the health impacts of the chemicals that they're using in the products that they make. They mostly look at a list of things that are banned and say, we can use anything other than these chemicals that are on this list. If a company switches to a different chemical, and years later that chemical is found to have similar health impacts, then they'll be able to say, oh, we didn't know, and then switch again, and put in some new, as of yet, unstudied chemical, and then basically rinse and repeat that whole process. So this is the shell game. The shell game is that transition, so that you actually don't get to know what's in it. Under this regime, companies don't have any incentive to test, to know what's in their products. It's actually cheaper and easier to practice the shell game. Whether it's a very highly ethical company or not, it's just that's the way that the system is all set up. But for our children and our families, it's an unplanned science experiment, and we're the guinea pigs. So CEH is in the process of ending this toxic shell game in sippy cups, and we're doing it for 2 reasons. One is to protect the kids who are drinking out of these sippy cups, but the second is to create a model that can then be used to actually end the shell game for all business models, for all business practices. I'm glad you like it. We like it too. Now there's good news, and the good news is that CEH is working on this, and at the Center for Environmental Health, we have 16 years of practice being successful, changing the business practices of multi-billion-dollar companies. So we've been able to get them to eliminate toxic chemicals that have gone into our air, our water, our food, and everyday consumer products, hundreds of them. So some examples. We took on Big Pharma and we forced them to take lead out of baby powder and diaper rash medications. Now, if there is a product that should not have lead in it, it's a product designed to be put on a baby's butt when the skin is broken. That's ridiculous. So it no longer does. Then we forced Mars and Hershey's to take lead out of candy. Then we got arsenic out of play structures. Then we got lead out of baby bibs. Then we got lead out of kids' lunchboxes. Then we got lead out of kids' jewelry and toys. Ultimately, our work caused the first ever national ban on lead in children's products. Tonight I want to tell you about the next shell game practitioner that we have in our sights, and I'm going to tell you a story to tell about it. And that story starts with big tobacco, and it ends with the chairs that you're all sitting in right now. So years ago, when cigarettes were discovered to be a leading cause of house fires, there was a whole movement to actually require cigarettes to be fire safe, so they'd go out quickly if you stopped puffing on them. But big tobacco didn't want this, because they didn't want to be liable for past deaths from past fires. So they got together with chemical companies and they said, we need to convince the public and the politicians, and they successfully did, that cigarettes weren't the problem. The problem were the couches that people were sitting on. So the solution is obvious when the couches, these dangerous couches, are out there, and that is to douse them, to douse them and foam mattresses with flame retardants that will make it so that they won't catch on fire. Pretty soon, California had passed regulations that essentially required chemical flame retardants in furniture and many other products. And nearly every furniture manufacturer across the country was making their furniture with these flame retardants. Pretty soon after that, scientists started to find these flame retardants in our homes, in our workplaces, in our schools, and most importantly, in our bodies. I know because I asked CEH staff to test the dust in my home for these toxic chemical flame retardants. And the dust from my vacuum cleaner was full of the stuff, absolutely full. And I wasn't the only one, because then we asked staff and board to submit dust from their homes, which some of them were reluctant to do, as you might imagine. And every single one, we tested about a dozen, every single board or staff member who participated in the study had these chemicals in the dust in their homes. But we're not unique. Every person in this room probably has these chemical flame retardants in their bodies right now. And because toddlers and babies, like my two kids, spend more time on the floor and more time putting their hands in their mouths, they have 3 times higher levels of these flame retardant chemicals than their moms do. And because we live in California and the California regulations that were passed at the behest of big tobacco and special interest chemical companies, it's even worse for us, and children in California have the highest levels of flame retardants of anyone in the world. So these chemicals are linked to health problems like cancer, diabetes, lower IQs, reduced fertility. So you think that the last place that we would find these things would be in the products that are designed for children to sleep on. But unfortunately, that's exactly what CEH found. We tested nap mats. We went and we bought the nap mats that are sold to preschools and daycare centers. We bought them from all of the sort of biggest brand ones that sell directly to daycare centers. And we found that every single one of them had these toxic flame retardants, and most of them had ones that were carcinogens. So now, for me, I don't know about you, I don't let my kids smoke during nap time, but maybe chemicals in nap mats would be okay, these chemicals, these particular toxic chemicals, if they were saving lives. But the issue is that the research that exists says it's not saving lives at all. A federal study of real-world applications found that furniture with flame retardants, these chemical flame retardants, burned just as fast, caught just as fast, and burned just as hot as ones without the chemicals. The only real difference was that the smoke was more toxic. So now back to your chairs. So the fire retardants in the chair that everybody here is sitting in is a perfect example of the shell game. At first, they used a chemical called penta-BDE in furniture. But then they started to say, oh, that's going on the bad list. That we've been able to prove that that's definitely toxic. So they switched to a new mixture, and that new mixture was Firemaster 550. But now EPA is starting to voice concerns about Firemaster 550, so they're already rolling out Firemaster 600. These chemical cousins, because they're very similar to the original penta-BDE and the other chemicals, are more than likely to have either similar or other just as grave health impacts. So this is the toxic shell game, just right here in the story of these chairs. You take a chemical that's found to be toxic and you replace it with a less well-tested, less well-known chemical. Then you call those ingredients a trade secret so no one can test them except you. And then you wait, and sooner or later, if someone finds that it's eventually that it's toxic, you just switch again. You just do the whole thing again. And that's what's happening with these flame retardants. And that also is potentially what's happening with, we don't know, with the new chemicals in the sippy cups. So the problem's big and complicated. But we have a unique opportunity to solve it in the context of flame retardants. So the Center for Environmental Health has been working on flame retardants for 5 years. But our time is right now. Right now is the time. We work very closely with the grandmother of this issue, a UC Berkeley chemist named Arlene Bloom. And Arlene's been working on it for decades. And you may have seen, and if not, you might want to check it out online, there was a great piece spread about her and the work on flame retardants yesterday in the New York Times Magazine. So here's why it's our time. First, the press has been beating up quite severely on the chemical companies and their obfuscation in the last few months. Second, unlike sippy cups, products with flame retardants can simply be replaced without the chemicals. You don't need to replace it with something else, since it's been proven that they don't deter fires anyways. So that would just end the shell game right there. They would just say, instead of replacing it with something else, we're just done. Make the product just like it is without those chemicals. Third, as a result of conversations that CEH and others have had with Governor Jerry Brown and his senior staff, the governor has instructed his staff to rewrite the regulation that has been the de facto requirement nationally for these flame retardants without a requirement for flame retardants. Fourth, at the national level, senior staff at the Federal Consumer Product Safety Commission have told me and others they're also going to come out with regulations that do not require the flame retardants. Finally, and most importantly, the companies that make the furniture and the other foam-containing products like your chairs tonight that contain these toxic chemicals have told us and our allies that they've had enough and they are going to actively push to get the chemicals out of their products too. So we have these really elegant suite of allies to work with. So we have the momentum. Over the next year, here's what we're going to do with it. We're going to address the problem by directly talking to the companies, ensuring strong public policy, and using our usual rigorous science. Here's the specifics. In the next 16 weeks, we're going to systematically test the products that babies sleep and nurse on. That means not just the nap mats, but crib foam mattresses and breastfeeding pillows. And we're going to see if these foam-containing products have these toxic chemicals. Now, these particular products aren't required to have the flame retardants, so they can already be reformulated right now. And so then in the next 16 months, we're going to take that data and we're going to work with those companies. And we'll work with the industry leaders to eliminate the flame retardants, and we're going to take on the industry laggards to make them take it out. And if anybody's illegally exposing people to these chemicals, then we're not going to be afraid to use litigation to force both the chemical companies and the companies using their chemicals to stop it. Finally, we're going to keep pressure on elected officials both in D.C. and regulators both in D.C. and in Sacramento to keep their promise that they're going to fix the regulations so that it doesn't encourage companies to use these chemicals. So the stars are aligning, and we think with a one-year push, we can really make a massive impact on this issue. And so that's what we're going to do. But we need your help. This is a $5 billion industry. They are not wallflowers, and they're not going to give up without a fight. The testing of the baby products alone is going to cost CEH probably $55,000 or $60,000 just to do that. That's not our staff time. That's just paying the labs. So in the next 16 minutes, I want to invite you to help us. And I want to invite you to do everything you can to help us kick off this really ambitious effort and take advantage of this great opportunity to really make a difference and protect our kids and ourselves from these toxic chemicals. So what do you say? Are you with me? So I want to invite Donald back up, and he's going to walk us through how to do it.